Welcome to another OneSoccer Hangout. I'm Kurt Larson alongside the usual pundit Oliver Platt to close out another week of isolation. But some news has emerged during this COVID-19 pandemic. It was just a few months ago. We heard rumblings of a proposed Canadian Soccer Players Union. Players have been somewhat reserved. The Canadian Premier League, of course, hasn't been interested in addressing it publicly. We've seen the commissioner asked a few times now publicly, and he has dismissed it somewhat. And I guess that's to be expected, guys. But earlier this week, the brains behind the Professional Footballers Association of Canada dropped an official website, pfacan.ca, if you want to go check it out. And they announced a leadership team and opened up to the media. Two of those men join us today. So let's welcome in Marcel De Jong, a current member of Pacific FC, one of the most accomplished Canadian footballers of the modern era. He's serving as president of PFA Can, and according to a recent piece in the Vancouver province, helped launch this union drive. And he's joined by the association's legal counsel, Paul Champ of Champ and Associates, who specializes in labor and employment law. I'm sure he's extra busy right now, unfortunately. But let's go to Marcel first. Marcel, what's up, man? How's the West Coast treating you? How's the Achilles injury? What's going on?
First of all, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. But yeah, no, it's good out here. Happy to be in a beautiful place like this. It could be a lot worse. So Achilles is doing well. I want to say I'm full training, but obviously we can't train. No, I'm happy that it's all fine and well.
And Paul, maybe a little bit about yourself. Can you just maybe introduce who you are to the larger, Canadian soccer public? I'm sure the players are watching on today. I'm sure the league's watching on today in some respects. But who is Paul Champ?
Well, I'm a labor and employment lawyer in Ottawa, Kurt. Been practicing for 20 years. Lived in a variety of places in Canada. Went to law school in Vancouver, so I know the West Coast where Marcel's at. And from Saskatchewan, spent time practicing there and also in Montreal. And I've got my own firm for the last 10 years, and I represent primarily, unions and individuals. And I'm a huge sports fan, so this has been kind of a dream project for me. It's been loads of fun getting to know the guys on the board of directors for PFA Canada, and talking to them about their issues and helping them out get where they are today.
Ollie, how you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm looking forward to this. Obviously, it's an important part of the process of growing the league, and I'm really excited to hear what these guys have to say. So appreciate them doing it.
Talk a little bit of coronavirus. There's been some talk of leagues like the NBA and Major League Baseball and MLS going to more isolated communities and holding parts of a season. I think the idea, Marcel, has been tossed around to maybe have Vancouver Island host a CPL event or half a season or something like that. Are you going to welcome us out there?
For sure. Let's do it.
Paul, the union going to agree to that, Paul?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's all the guys are training, right? Like Marcel's saying he's not training, but I know he actually is. They've got Zoom meetings with their clubs every day. All the guys are in contact with the teams and with each other regularly. So they're trying to remain as much as they can in game shape, so that if there are circumstances or contexts when they can play again, they're ready to go.
All right, let's get into this now. I'm going to ask this one's for both of you, just to kick this off, and it's kind of a big picture question. I think some of it was answered in JJ Adams' recent piece in the Vancouver province, kind of a coming out party for you guys. But maybe to Paul first. Why is a players' union necessary? Maybe for those on the outside who don't really know what it's all about.
Well, just generally, I mean, a players' union is the norm in all sports leagues. It provides a single point of contact with the league and the players in coming up with, the standardized terms and conditions that applies to all players across the league. Obviously, individual players are going to work out their own individual contracts, for compensation and duration. But there's all kinds of issues around, training schedules, appearance fees, injuries, what happens with injuries, all kinds of issues like that, where it's better to have a union or an association representing the players and a single point of contact with the league.
Yeah, maybe this one, I'll throw this one over to Marcel and a little more pointed. We all heard about the deferral that the players were told they were going to take. It was 25% of their salary. I mean, Marcel, the emergence of this did seem kind of hasty. Was how quickly this kind of information dropped, the result of that 25% deferral?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of hit us out of the blue. Obviously, nobody. I mean, we kind of expected at some point that we were gonna have to face an issue like this. But yeah, hearing it just like an hour before it was dropped is obviously not the way we want to receive this news. So, but yeah, I mean, we understand the situation. Obviously, we know it's about the league, and we're not here to, you know, to say, oh, what are you guys doing? My money, you know, we understand it. So it's just a matter of how this message was delivered. That's, I think, the main issue for us at this point.
Marcel, we're going to get into obviously plenty more of that and the specific issues that you guys are facing right now. But just to start, I wanted to ask for a little bit of maybe a brief history of where the idea for this came from, what the process was like to get to where we are now, and Paul, maybe how you became involved as well.
Yeah, so obviously I was fortunate enough to play abroad and overseas in Germany and Holland and MLS, and yeah, so the level there is just obviously extraordinary. It's just top notch, and it is something that I want for Canada as well. You know, to get to that level, it's going to be a long line of challenges, obviously, but that's normal. But just the way I was treated there as a player is just yeah. I was just grateful to have you know, the support from the fans, from the league, from the players union, all there. It was just one great package deal, and that's something that was missing here, and is still missing. But obviously, last year I had to deal with an injury. I had a lot of time on to deal with my personal stuff, and also think about, you know, what's important for me and for Canada, and so we started talking, and we decided that this is something we definitely need, and so we reached out to a couple of guys, and obviously with our executive director Dan Kruk, he's been one of the guys who's been driving this, and so we were yeah, lucky that we found each other and created this union.
Paul, what about your journey to this? I mean, how do you get involved? You're on the East Coast, obviously, and I guess things kind of started in the West. But
yeah.
You know, how are you connected here?
Yeah, I got brought in by Dan Kruk, who's the executive director of PFA Canada. I didn't know him from before. He was friends of an old university buddy of mine from too long ago. And he was trying to find a labor lawyer who could maybe assist the PFA Canada get off the ground. You know, what's required. It's a tricky situation, obviously, legally, with players and clubs in different jurisdictions across the country, different provinces. And also sports, just generally sports, there aren't a lot of labor board cases involving any of the leagues, whether it's the CFL or the NHL or what have you. So it's a different kind of space. I didn't know Dan at all. He told me he was a union organizer and then a big fan. He was a big soccer fan, and he'd gotten involved from just speaking with Marcel. So I said, well, let me think about it. Let me talk to some of the players. Can you put me in touch with some of the guys you've been talking to? So I did. I spoke to Marcel and Issy and a few other guys who were interested in getting involved, and some that were having contract issues, quite frankly, right away. And when I looked into it, it seemed like kind of a fun project. And you know, quite frankly, though, the last thing that probably put me on the radar is that I'm kind of a lawyer that'll take up causes now and then, and they'd spoken, I think, to a couple other labor lawyers who were, you know, saying, okay, yeah, sure, we're happy to help out, but give us a retainer of X thousands of dollars. Whereas yeah. I agreed to take on this project for free because I thought it was, you know, a lot of fun. I'm a sports fan, but I'm also a fan of fairness, and it just seemed like a really neat thing to get involved with and help out.
Yeah, just a little more on the background, Marcel. Can I ask you, did Did you and Issy or any of the players who were first involved in this approach Dan, or did Dan approach you guys first?
I think first of all, Issy and myself, we were talking about this amongst ourselves, and we were saying like, this is kind of weird. We don't have a players union. We don't have anyone where we can talk to with our issues. So we already started this, and then coincidentally, about a couple of weeks later, Dan reached out with an email, and yeah, now we're here.
Okay, going back to JJ Adams' recent piece in the Vancouver province, it was mentioned, I'm not sure where he got the numbers from, I assume from somebody within PFA Can, that 140 players out of, I believe, 159 had signed union cards or agreed to, be part of this union. Can you give us a little more detail on that? Because some of that is disputed from some of the players we talked to. So were these union cards signed, or was it just an email saying we're in? What was it?
It's electronic membership cards.
Okay.
We ensured that the language in the membership cards are consistent with the requirements of all the different provinces. Depending which way this goes, and with authorized electronic signatures confirming that they want to be members of PFA Canada and that they want PFA Canada to be their exclusive bargaining agent. And we provide, sworn evidence to the league about that. Labor laws protect the confidentiality of players who join. So we don't have to tell the league who those specific individuals are. But I mean, I'm not sure who you're talking to, Kurt, about the numbers. Actually, we've gotten more since then. We've gotten more coming in. Since on Monday or Tuesday when we contacted the league, we've now had, I think, 3 or 4 more guys who've joined. So it's pretty strong, broad support. I mean, normally in organizing drives, you'll see, 60 or 75% sign up. And usually it takes like a month or 2 to get people persuaded. And this was pretty immediate. It was a week. The first few days was huge numbers. And then the last few days, we just had a few conversations. Our team reps, you've seen our board of directors. We've got leaders on every single team who reached out to some of the players on their teams. And, by Sunday, we had the huge numbers of support.
So it'd be fair to say at this point that there's, an overwhelming majority is kind of on board in terms of the players. Absolutely. Okay, so with that being the case, where do we kind of go from here in terms of communication with the league, but also, I guess, with provincial and federal authorities and all of that?
Yeah, well, we've reached out to the league. There's 2 ways this can go, Oliver. In union organizing drives, the union and the employer can reach what's called a voluntary recognition agreement, where the 2 organizations reach an agreement that the union or the association will act as the official bargaining agent for the employees, or in this case, the players. Then usually what happens, there's a notice to bargain. We're open to talking to them about significantly delaying any bargaining, because again, that's not our main issue right now. But in any event, if the employer, in this case, the league, doesn't recognize the union or won't agree to a voluntary recognition, then you have to go to a labor board and apply for certification.
Okay.
So in regards to, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you get to that kind of 90% number, you would then approach the CPL or the CPL's lawyers about a voluntary recognition of the union. Now then, how likely do you think that is to happen based on your experience?
Well, it's a really tough call, Kurt. We have approached the league on Tuesday. We reached out to Commissioner Clanahan, and we have heard back from them, and they're taking a look at it. How likely is it? I mean, every situation is different. If this was Walmart, I would say we're in for a fight. But I'm hoping that the league and the owners will understand that professional footballers associations are the norm. Like, frankly, Canada is the only country in the world where its top league does not have a players association. And incidentally, Kurt, that's another part of our history I hadn't mentioned, is that FIFPro, which is the International Federation of Players Associations, have provided enormous support to us. They sent you guys a letter as well, right? Well, a letter. I flew to Amsterdam. They hosted me in a meeting in February. I think they kind of, there had been a lot of discussions with them and Dan and Marcel and Issy and some of the other guys, and I'd spoken to them once or twice. And I think before they gave their full support, they kind of wanted to see, the whites of my eyes, so to speak. So I went down there, and it was during a legal congress. There were players associations for lawyers for players associations around the world who happened to be there. And it was really pretty amazing. It was a 2-day conference. I got to meet all these lawyers and also FIFA adjudicators, also Court of Arbitration of Sport adjudicators. And I can tell you, it was really energizing for me to see, the different kinds of issues that are going on, and how close, actually, in a lot of places, a lot of ways, the associations work hand in hand with the leagues everywhere else in the world. So, Kurt, I just thought it's not a real big stretch for the CPL here at all, because they are part of the FIFA pyramid, right? They are closely they're authorized and sanctioned by FIFA. And some of them are CFL owners, where there's a players association. So, as Oliver pointed out, a players association is inevitable for this league. The only question is why or when. And on that point, I get it. The why and when, they might question that.
I think the commissioner might disagree with you that it was inevitable based on some of the things he's doing. We'll get to that.
But he's not a soccer guy, He's not a footballer. He's not a footballer guy per se. He's the commissioner, which is great, and he brings great expertise to the role. But we know what his background is. But ultimately, it's not going to be the commissioner who decides. It'll be the club owners.
Is there a timeline? So is there a time? Like let's say that the league goes with the decision to not self-recognize, denies the union, and how much more arduous is that process then? I guess you would have to go to the provinces and set something up in each one of the provinces. I mean, how arduous is that route?
Well, make no mistake, Kurt, that is a bit of a struggle, because we'll have to apply in 5 different provinces to get certification with the different clubs. But we're ready for it. I've done the research and the background work on it, so we're ready. I mean, I've went to law school in BC, so I know BC labor law very well. I worked for a labor law prof there for a few years, and Ontario I know very well. So I had to get up to speed in Alberta, Manitoba, and Nova Scotia. But we're ready to go, and we've got the FIFPro backing on that, if you know what I mean. So it just doesn't make sense when you got that level of support. Why would they want us to go off and apply to the different boards and get in a dispute on the costs that we would incur and they would incur, and to what end? And especially at the end of the day, Kurt, right now, we're not looking for a collective agreement. That's not what it's about. We want to talk to them about what are the challenges facing the league right now. Health and safety, wages, government support. Those are issues that we share in common, above all. And right now we see it as urgent that they come to the table and work with us, so we can move forward together.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Oliver get in here after this one, just because you mentioned it. You did mention the significant cost to not only the league, but also to a proposed players union. Now, you've mentioned that you are pro bono right now, I believe. I'm not sure what Dan Kruk's situation is. But if it's costly, how do you afford something like this? How do the players union, how do they afford something like this? They're not paying dues right now, right? So how do you afford that kind of what might be to come?
Well, that's what we will look at. As I said, we have gotten financial support from FIFPro, so we do have some dollars there. And so if I've got to ramp up significantly to do that kind of stuff, we will. One nice thing about actually COVID that'll actually help us a little bit is that most courts and labor boards across the country have converted to doing things electronically. So it'll actually make it a little bit easier for us on that front. So it'll just be preparing the sets of materials and making sure that we dot the I's and cross the T's for each particular jurisdiction. Making the applications will take a bit of work, but I think we're in place to do that. And then, you know what, the league's going to be in a position where they're going to have to come up with responses in 5 jurisdictions across the country. So anyways, I'm sure they're playing that out as well, Kurt, but that has to follow, after they've stepped over the decision of, well, why do we even want to oppose this? And that's what we're hoping is the real position or the question that they'll have before them right now.
Paul, you mentioned that a collective agreement isn't really something you're going to be pushing for immediately. Do you have a kind of timeline on when you think that will become appropriate or something to talk about?
Well, we'll talk to the league about that. We're open to having an agreement with the league that we will not talk about collective agreement for X period of time. We don't want to say expressly right now, Oliver. That's a discussion we'd like to have directly with the league, but we're more than willing to agree to a very significant period of time before we even talk about collective bargaining. And I mean, everyone sees the reality of the world. Quite frankly, recognizing the union right now is not going to cost the league one dime. Not in 2020 anyway. And so that's why we're hoping we can come together and work with them.
Oliver, I'm gonna let you get in with the commissioner's responses here after this, but just for Marcel, I mean, we know you mentioned your own personal situation, just given your injury and what that might have meant being in other leagues. But have you heard from other players on some of their chief concerns right now?
In the CPL?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we heard some problems, but I don't think that's something we want to discuss right now or put it public. So I mean, I'm not in a position to portray those confidential discussions I had with the players, or Dan or Paul.
Yeah, so just to go back to, we mentioned the commissioner had made some comments about maybe not seeing a union as inevitable. And I think he questioned why you would want to put someone in between the player and the league. Did those comments kind of surprise you guys at all? And what would your response be there?
Marcel?
I mean, obviously, it's normal that you get a reaction like that. I think. I mean, we were not that surprised. I mean, but if we're all being realistic, I mean, this is something it happens everywhere in the world. There's a union everywhere in Germany, in Holland, in MLS, USL, and so on. So I mean, I'm just I'm not surprised. Let's just say it.
Yeah, Paul,
Oliver, I was going to say, in the footballer universe, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone. The commissioner's response on that's just more sort of classic, old school employer type stuff that you see in some industries in Canada and the US. But in sports, and in particular the footballer movement, players' associations are the norm. And I think that a lot of the other people who are in leadership roles in the league understand that.
Paul, this one, I can direct this one to you. And I think when we're comparing it to other leagues, the difference, of course, is that we're just completed an inaugural season for a league that's a startup, essentially. Ownership is, I would guess, losing a significant amount of money right here to get things going. So what about the wisdom of maybe launching something like this, not just this early in the process when things are still very tenuous, and also during a global pandemic?
Mm-hmm. Well, Kurt, we absolutely had those discussions. Originally we were going to go on a bit of an organizing tour within a 10-day period and visit all the players one-on-one. We're going to have like the team rep and then either Dan or myself go and meet with the guys one-on-one to organize and hopefully approach the league, at the start of the season to start talking about those issues. When COVID-19 came down, well, it was a big blow in a number of ways. Obviously, first of all, we couldn't travel, and second of all, where was the league and where was the players in these circumstances? And it just didn't seem like the right thing to do. Obviously, right now when we don't even know when games might start. So we hadn't sort of decided yet what we were going to do for sure, but that's obviously the discussions that all of us were having, and it was kind of put on the shelf for a bit. But when the 25% wage cut or wage deferral came in, we were all getting contacted by players. There's a big wave of players with all kinds of questions. And so we had another board meeting and we talked about it, and we kind of realized, it's, what are we going to do? That was the sort of pivot point. Are we going to put a pin in this for a year? Or do we reach out to the league now, try to do organizing now and reach out to the league to try to move forward? And, we felt it just didn't seem right not talking to players or telling the players, sorry, you know what, the league's got a big revenue hole right now and this isn't an ideal time to talk to them. It kind of felt like we were abandoning the players. So we actually think this is actually a more important time than ever, Kurt. When we started going through the issues of like how they're going to bring in wage compensation compensation changes or deferrals or cuts, occupational health and safety issues when and if they start the league again, dealing with the government for financial assistance, which they're absolutely going to need and deserve. We began to realize that, it's actually maybe a great moment for the association to come forward where we can, play the role of a single point of contact for the league when they want to contact or deal with the players on any, compensation issues, when they want to talk to all the players at once in a way around health and safety issues. And, ideally when we, go together to provide a story to the federal government about why they need to provide funds to support this league during this difficult time.
Yeah, this one, where I'm going to go with this one fits in a little bit where Oliver's going to go next. But I'm just curious, going back to the numbers, you mentioned you got a few more votes, so I guess you're up to 142, 143, or 100 or new cards.
Something like that, yeah.
Where did you find that there were players holding out across the league, or was it one team that had a group of players that were holding out?
I don't want to get into too much detail, Kurt, but there were pockets. Some players had individual issues, and some of them, actually, I'd say some players, even on our board, had the same kind of questions that you had. Well, is this the right night? Is this the right time to go into the league when they're under such financial pressure? But when we kind of walked everyone through it, now is the time when the league needs us. The league needs us and the players need us, and we can play a really helpful role in getting through this challenging season. We were able to persuade guys to come on board. I won't get I know some of the reasons for a lot of the guys who haven't signed, and I don't want to get into those, but they're understandable, and there's individual issues out there. But at the end of the day, Kurt, any kind of organizing drive I've ever been involved with, I've never seen anything like this level of support, and that's where we are today.
One of the issues that was raised when I was speaking to some people around the league was this idea that there's quite a lot of players in the league right now that are on very low wages in the grand scheme of world football. Now, obviously, it may be difficult to build a career on that kind of salary, but on the other hand, those low salaries have maybe allowed the teams to employ a large number of young players who wouldn't otherwise be playing professionally. And you see an example like Joe Waterman, who goes on to the Montreal Impact and to MLS. And that's, a life-changing opportunity in the end for him. What would your guys' position be on just kind of how you're going to deal with that lower end of the scale? And how would you kind of balance that dilemma of having players who maybe you want to improve the conditions for, but you also don't want to destroy job creation?
Hey, those are great questions, Oliver. That's kind of the really exciting thing about this league, I find, is the real mix of players. Because you're seeing guys like you're saying, Oliver, describing, they're young guys. They're just coming up. Some of them that we're talking to, this is their first professional team, right? Their first contracts they've signed has been with the CPL. You're also having guys who have played in a lot of leagues around the world, Bundesliga, like Marcel, guys who played in the Netherlands or the UK or Asia or Ireland, MSL, and they're at a different point in their careers where CPL makes sense for family reasons and what have you. So it's a real mix of very experienced guys and less experienced guys. And so some of them are definitely at different points in their playing careers, but also their income. Like you have guys like Marcel who has a family, right? Where a younger guy doesn't. So those are definitely interesting dynamics from this league, where some of the guys are younger and they're hopefully going to see CPL being a launching pad to another league, and other guys who are maybe trying to settle down, and it's a nice place to spend the last number of years of their careers. And so those are challenges that we'll work through, Oliver, I think, in terms of what are the kinds of things that we would even want in a collective agreement than is different in the standard player contracts, etc. But there's no doubt that there's different considerations, I think, for this league than there is, say, for the MLS or a tier 1 league in Europe. There's no question. But those are things I think would come out in the collective bargaining.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot who mentioned it in the province article, but it was mentioned that some of the ownership or general managers in the league that have been approached have been quite receptive to this idea this early on in the process. But Marcel, I mean, have you had conversations with your ownership out there and the the CEO and president that you know so well? I mean, what have they said?
Yeah, I did. They reached out, and obviously, yeah, Rob and Josh, we played together, so we know each other a little bit better than I would think with another owner or another player. So we do have that relationship. I did let them know personally after we came out publicly that I'm working on this, and this was probably a couple days ago. But I did not hear back from them. But yeah, I mean, obviously they're all dealing with their own issues with running a club, so I'm pretty sure they got their hands full, and so it's all good.
Sure, league executives right now are huddled around their computers watching what you guys have to say. Now, Paul, what would you want to hear from the league right now, or in the coming weeks?
Well, I think we've approached them really open-handedly about working together right now. That we're recognizing it's a crisis for the league. And we would like to just at least have a conversation with them about how we can work with them to get them through this. I think that there's a lot of value that the association can bring to the league in getting through this situation. And obviously, we're all on the same page as that. No one wants, a healthy, sustainable league more than these players. Other than the fans, maybe, right? Obviously, but I think that if they just sit down and have a conversation with us, they realize, they're reasonable guys. I mean, you guys can see what our board of directors are, right? I mean, those are all solid, reasonable individuals, and I know that the clubs recognize that. They recognize the quality of the people who are in the leadership positions with the organization, and we just want to have that dialogue with them about doing what's best for the league.
Just got a few more minutes here, guys, and then we'll get you out of here. We really appreciate your time today. It's been really insightful and really engaging. Wonder if this was on your radar, and what your response would be to this. Is there's a lot of very wealthy owners who have invested quite a bit into this, and there was one Canadian soccer executive who recently tweeted out that he kind of looked at the players as beneficiaries of philanthropy, and at the moment. How would you respond to that, Paul and Marcel?
I don't know if Marcel wants to answer that one first, or I mean,
nah, you go, you go ahead.
Kurt, there's no question that I'm sure the business model for this league is that they're going to lose money for the first couple of years. Like, even you take COVID out of it, and there's no doubt that their business model was that there were going to be a few years of losses. But I think anyone who knows soccer like you guys do knows that soccer is a growing sport. In Canada in particular, the numbers of young people playing it are growing massively. The quality elite players coming out of Canada are growing every year, and the demographics of Canada are changing too. Different people coming from different parts of the world to Canada who have more of a footballing tradition. So I think they, the owners, I'm sure, see that. And then, of course, we've got the 2026 World Cup coming up in North America, which will obviously also provide a big boost. So, Kurt, I think, or Oliver, I think there is money in this league. I think that it's a success. It will be a very financially successful league. I think that they're going to attract a lot more fans, and ultimately, that's why they're going to have more quality players like Marcel, who could be playing, all kinds of places around the world. But he's able to come home and work in the country, or play in the country where he's from, and I think it's a lot of things coming together that spells the success of this league.
Can I just ask real quick? I mean, does this also, or are there hopes to include the national teams in this, and other areas of the Canadian soccer pyramid? Is this just CPL? What is this right now?
No, Kurt, thanks for asking that. I'm going to get, when Dan watches this later, he's going to give me crap for not mentioning that earlier. But absolutely, we are reaching out to, already have reached out to others, clubs and teams, and we would like to bring in the national teams as well. With this Professional Footballer Players Association, that's what other countries do. It's a single players or footballers association for each country, and we think we can provide that. And there's a lot of equity issues there for women players. be great to start seeing women professional teams in Canada as well. And when they do, we want to be there for them, but also for the national players. You know, the Canadian national women's team, for example, they had a history, you know, a couple of decades ago where they were really struggling and dealing with Canadian Soccer Association and Sports Canada. And it's been a bumpy road for them at times. So, you know, they're working with Sports Canada and CSA right now, but you know, we're hoping that we can bring the value proposition to them about why we can help them out. And quite frankly, I think it'd be terrific for you know, this association to have women join us at some point.
Yeah, you kind of already covered it there, Paul, but is obviously you did mention on the website that this was for all players, Canadian players. Is the groundwork being laid at all in terms of the women's game, or is that something down the road that you'd like to get to?
Well, obviously with the CPL season starting so quickly, and that was our main focus at the beginning, but we've reached out and we've had conversations, and you know, there've been good conversations. I'm sure they'll continue.
Mm-hmm. All right, Paul, thanks for your time today, Marcel. We wish you all the best out there, and hope to see you back on the field after missing a significant portion of last season. And of course, we're going to keep track of what's going on with the PFA CAN. Coming up next week on OneSoccer's work from home programming, HFX Wanderers coach Stephen Hart joins the Hangout on Monday, followed by Julian Buser Tuesday and Terry Dunfield on Wednesday. We have Gareth Wheeler, as always, confirming a few very high-profile guests, so look out for that. The ladies on Happy Hour are hoping to have Melissa Tancredi join them Wednesday night. And for our Quebec viewers desperate for some content, we're inviting Arcadio for a fresh perspective on the Montreal Impact Toronto FC rivalry. Until then, have a good weekend, guys. Stay safe, and we're out.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Cheers.